This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa and it's Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This is a series where I rank cards based on their performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Over the last month and a half or so, I've been looking at 1-drops, and now I've covered them in every color except for green, so that's what I'm doing now. Remember, to qualify as a 1-drop, a card has to be a permanent with a converted mana cost of 1. That means instants and sorceries are not eligible. Additionally, for this list, I decided to make a sizable exclusion. I'm not including any mana dorks. If I did, that is mostly what the list would be, and I've already done an MTG Top 10 on mana dorks, so I thought it would make sense to not include them on this list. If they had been included, they would have occupied the 6 top spots on this list and 7 out of 10 spots total. That would have made for a very uninteresting list, so I excluded them. Here, you can see where they would have ranked if they had been included. You can always go check out the Mana Dorks video I've already done if you're interested in learning more about them. Alright, with that out of the way, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour, Players Tour, or Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Alright, at number 10, it's Glisten Ralph, a green 1-drop that has the beloved Infect keyword ability. Infect decks are generally aggro decks that load up with ways to pump their Infect creatures so that they can quickly get 10 poison counters on the opponent. As a 1-mana 1/1, Glisten Ralph is the perfect 1-drop for the deck, as it can start pressuring the opponent right away. Infect decks have found success in multiple formats, and Glisten Ralph has managed points in both Modern and Legacy Infect decks. At number 9, it's Basking Rootwalla, a 1-mana 1/1 who can pump itself. That on its own would not be enough to make the Rootwalla such a good card. Madness is what really pushes it over the edge. If you have a way to discard the Rootwalla, you can put it into play for free, sometimes at instant speed, depending on how you're discarding the card. Of course, the decks that have played it over the years have no problem finding ways to discard cards, and the Rootwalla gives you more than your mana's worth on those occasions. Basking Rootwalla was played in Blue-Green Madness decks in Block, Standard, Extended, and Legacy. These were generally aggressive decks loaded up with creatures with super efficient mana costs and a bunch of ways to discard cards. Other decks in Legacy included Blue-Green Threshold and Survival of the Fittest decks. Those decks tend to be toolbox decks built around the powerful green enchantment, and obviously enough, discarding a Rootwalla to Survival means you get a creature into play, and you still get to search up whatever you want with Survival, and that's pretty insane. As a result, it is also played in Vintage Survival of the Fittest decks. At number 8, it's Vessel of Nascency. This is the kind of card that doesn't seem all that powerful at first glance. In the end, you have to pay 3 mana just to get a little bit of card selection, and there are lots of cards out there that do that more efficiently. However, the Vessel also helps you quickly load up your graveyard, and that's where the real value comes from. In the Standard of its day, one of the best decks around was Black-Green Delirium. Delirium is a mechanic that checks for card types in your graveyard, and the Vessel was very good at helping those decks reach Delirium. In fact, the Vessel could help you reach Delirium single-handedly. This is because the Vessel itself goes to the graveyard too. And enchantment was a card type that wasn't all that easy to get into the graveyard in most cases, and the other cards that get thrown in there could easily have more common card types, like creature, land, instant, or sorcery. Once you had Delirium going, it basically powered your whole deck, so being able to get there on turn 2 was a huge advantage. While the Vessel hasn't gained points in any other formats yet, it is being played in Pioneer, so that may change in the future. At number 7, I have 2 cards because their fates are so intertwined, and they kind of do similar things. Those cards are Exploration, the legit number 7, and Mana Bond, which would have been number 8. Both of them are super powerful enchantments that let you get lands into play quickly, starting as early as turn 1. Exploration lets you get an extra land in play each turn, and Mana Bond lets you dump all your lands on the table on turn 1 at the cost of losing the other cards in your hand. Both of them are key cards in Legacy Lands decks. These are decks made up almost exclusively out of lands. This means Mana Bond has no real downside a lot of the time, and Exploration lets you get your powerful lands out even more quickly. Exploration does have a few more points than Mana Bond as a result of also gaining some points in extended ramp decks. Lands continues to be a relevant deck in Legacy, and as a result, these two are likely to continue to move up this list. At number 6, it's Warden of the First Tree. The Warden is a nice little 1-drop because it can become larger and larger with various installment payments, easily being a 3/3 on turn 2 and becoming progressively scarier as the game goes on. It's a nice way to make sure that even if you're flooding out, you have somewhere meaningful to pump your mana. The whole time it was in Standard, it was an important card in the dominant Abzan decks, and that's where it got all of its points. At number 5, it's Wild Nakata, which is one of the most efficient 1-drops on this list since it can be a 1-mana 3/3. This is especially easy to accomplish in formats with fetch lands and dual lands. However, that wasn't something that was super easy to do in the Standard of the time, and that's why the Nakata only managed 5 points between both Block and Standard. However, Extended was a format where it could be a 1-mana 3/3 a significant chunk of the time, and as a result, the Nakata was played in Zoo, Aggro, and Burn decks. It can help those kinds of decks do huge amounts of damage in very little time, putting the opponent under a lot of pressure starting on turn 1. The Nakata was banned just a few months after the modern format was born because people were concerned it made aggressive decks too good, but after being unbanned in 2014, it has gone on to put up lots of points in the format. It has been played in a variety of aggressive decks in the format, including Burn and Zoo. The Nakata also used to see play in Zoo decks in Legacy, but it doesn't have any points in that format since 2013. Still, the Nakata looks like it will keep putting up points in Modern, so that could mean it will advance further up this list going forward. At number 4, I have 3 cards. This is because, much like Exploration and Mana Bond, these 3 cards have their fates very much tied together. They are Nettle Sentinel, Heritage Druid, and Wirewood Symbiote. All 3 of them are elf payoffs, and they all work really well together in elf-based combo decks. The Druid lets you tap elves to add mana, the Symbiote lets you untap Heritage Druid, and Nettle Sentinel untaps every time you play something green, so it can be used to add more mana with the Heritage Druid. The first time combos involving these 3, and a bunch of other elves, emerged was in Extended, in particular at Pro Tour Berlin in 2008. There, these creatures were combined with a bunch of other elves and Glimpse of Nature. After casting that sorcery, you could effectively draw your entire deck as a result of mana you could continue to produce with more and more elves coming into play, thanks to things like Heritage Druid and the Symbiote and so forth. As you drew through your entire library and produced more mana, you could either win the game with a card with Storm or Predator Dragon, who could eat all your elves and end the game. The power of this combo resulted in Glimpse of Nature being banned when Modern was created, and it's still banned in that format today. However, the combo can still be played in Legacy. In that version of the deck, the win condition is usually Craterhoof Behemoth. Even with Glimpse banned, Nettle Sentinel and Heritage Druid have continued to see play in Modern. They may not have access to Glimpse or the Wirewood Symbiote, but they can still go crazy with a bunch of mana-producing elves, either just straight up winning with elf aggro or going wide and using something like Uzuri Renegade Leader or Shaman of the Pack. At number 3, it is Rancor, which is arguably the best stats-improving aura in this entire game. Rancor has an interesting design history, as some of those who designed this set thought that they sent it to the printers costing 2 generic and 1 green, but in the end it came out as only 1 green mana. If you're interested in the details of this story, I did talk about it in depth in an MTG top 10 on cards that got changed on the last minute, because I'm not going to go in depth about it here. So you can't normally play Rancor on turn 1, but the fact it costs a single mana is absurd and makes it pretty easy for you to recast it, even on turns when you get it back after it goes to the graveyard. 1 green mana for +2/+0 and trample is great and capable of making just about any creature into a threat, and that threat usually won't end when you kill that creature because Rancor keeps coming back. In both Block and Standard, it helped make mono-green aggro decks into a legitimate archetype. In its second run through Standard, it was played in Bant hexproof decks. In Extended, it was featured in red-green aggro decks, and in Modern, it has seen play not only in Bogles, but also in Infect decks, where the stats boost and evasion can be particularly nasty. At number 2, it's Oath of Nissa, a 1-drop legendary enchantment. It's part of a pretty cool cycle of cards that began in Oath of the Gatewatch. In that set, a Planeswalker Justice League of sorts was formed, and each of the people becoming part of this Gatewatch took an oath and got a card, and since then, as other people have joined the Gatewatch over time, we've gotten other oaths in other sets. All of the oaths have some sort of effect, along with doing something to make your planeswalkers a little bit better. In the case of Oath of Nissa, you get the nice card selection, and that's a pretty nice thing to get on turn 1. And the oath can also make it easier to cast your planeswalkers. Oath of Nissa has gained most of its points in Standard, frequently in decks that can take advantage of both of the oath's effects. In other words, she's been played in decks that have multiple planeswalkers, usually of at least 2 different colors. In those decks, she's giving you the card selection and making it easier to cast your planeswalkers. When she was first printed, her primary home was in Selesnya tokens decks, which ran several planeswalkers who could produce tokens. Later on, it was played in copycat combo decks, which were generally 4-color decks looking to combo off using Saheeli Rai. Oath of Nissa helped that deck more consistently find Saheeli Rai and made it easier to cast her on turn 3, and those are critical things for the deck. In Modern, it's been played in Valakut and Toolbox decks, both of which run combos that Nissa can help you dig for. The Oath doesn't have any points in any format since 2017, but it is seeing play in Pioneer, and will probably gain some points in that format going forward. And at number 1, it is Nimble Mongoose. While a 1-mana 1/1 with Shroud is nothing too special, Nimble Mongoose becomes a 1-mana 3/3 with Shroud when you reach Threshold, and in many formats, getting Threshold online is pretty darn easy. In general, Threshold is considered by many, including Mark Rosewater and others at Wizards, to be one of the most poorly designed mechanics ever, for the simple fact that it's far too easy to get 7 cards into your graveyard. The Mongoose having this powerful mechanic, plus the fact that it can't be targeted by spot removal, has resulted in the Mongoose being an excellent green 1-drop, especially in Legacy, where it has been fairly prolific, and an argument can certainly be made that the Mongoose is the best green 1-drop that isn't a mana dork, as this list shows. Even in block, it was easy to get Threshold. This is thanks to the fact that the block the Mongoose was part of, Odyssey block, also was heavy in the Madness mechanic and ways to discard cards. It seems like a good idea to put all together, right? This resulted in a blue-green Threshold deck being one of the most dominant decks in the format. Legacy also has a deck built around Threshold, usually called Canadian Threshold. In addition to that, the Mongoose is also played in some Delver decks in the format. The Mongoose doesn't have any points since 2018, and there are fewer Legacy events being held these days, but it is fairly likely that it will gain points in the format again at some point. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.